This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
In the year 2039, Gotham City has no heroes. Its people, no hope. Its youth, no future.
Evening, boys and girls. Who's up for some laughs?
Terry McGinnis was part of the problem.
Right there. You can't control your temper, and you'd better if you expect to get anywhere in life.
Yeah, I'll be a big success, just like you.
Until a moment of violence brought him to the door of a man named Bruce Wayne.
Let's put a smile on his face.
Leave him alone. Once known as the Batman.
Man, you're something. You okay?
Now, the Dark Knight will rise again to drive the shadow of evil from the streets of Gotham. Let's go! Supervillains, beware! There's a new Batman in town. Batman Beyond. You're pretty strong for some clown who thinks he's Batman. I am Batman. Justice returns to Gotham. Welcome to my world.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 261 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal. With me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. It's Liam. Liam, we are continuing here in our Back to the Future month as we once again are back in the purplish skies of futuristic Gotham. And we are continuing along with our review of Season 3 of the Future Dark Knight, Batman of the Future, Batman Beyond, whatever you want to call him, as we have an interesting one here as we sort of wrap up what I would call the Inque Trilogy with a reappearance by one of Batman's maybe most memorable rogues, certainly counted among them at least.
Absolutely. It's her last full appearance. She does have one more minor one later on in the series, but it's not the most relevant thing in that episode because it also features Superman, for instance. but yes, this is her last full appearance, the last episode that focuses on her, talking about Inqueling, and not only does it focus on Inque as the villain, but we find out a little bit more about her backstory and in this case her daughter. And yes, as the aforementioned episode, Inqueling. So a lot of fun stuff to get into today.
It's a fun little play on words, Inqueling. You know, so many things there. Inkling, like you have this idea, you have this idea that something is going to happen. Inkling, ink is spelled like ink. That's funny. But then, of course, also like a little ink would be an inkling, right? The child, a begotten child of ink would be an inkling. So many levels here. You know, you get space brain just thinking about it. Or maybe not. But before we get into our breakdown of the full episode today, Liam, our 4 categories that we cover each and every week, we are, of course, going to get to the official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which originally debuted here in the States on the Kids WB back on September the 30th in the year 2000, meaning we are coming up on the 23-year anniversary of this episode's debut. And of course, the official IMDb synopsis is brought to you by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower and subscribe there if you want to get great content like the Jump on the Bat-Wagon podcast or check out the Tim Talk podcast, sitting there alongside our entire catalog of episodes, all 260 prior episodes, plus bonus episodes, all in one convenient streaming space just for you. That's youtube.com/The Pod Tower.
So this is the synopsis for the episode Inqueling, which was written by Hilary J. Bader, directed by Butch Lukic, with music by Michael McChristian and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. Seriously wounded in a double cross, Inque approaches her estranged daughter for help.
That's all we got?
That's all we got.
Oh no, bare minimum. I think they just read the synopsis on the back of the book and just wrote the whole book report off of that. Oh, see me after class, IMDb. That's a D, maybe a D minus. IMDb's poor performance aside, we will continue with, of course, breaking our synopsis of the plot down as we open things up at, I believe, the futuristic Elon Musk SpaceX launch. Oh, just kidding. I'm just being told it is not SpaceX or Elon Musk. It is at the Shimano Space Center, where there appears to be a launch of a satellite into space, and the company owner, who is this man named Winchell, I believe, or Winchell, he's very, very on edge as he realizes that this satellite is worth quite a bit of money, approaching $1 billion, I believe we're told. And just as it's about to take off, of course, nothing can ever go right for the billionaires. When will they catch a break? You know, when will the rich people, be afforded some good luck?
I'm always saying that.
Constantly. And just as, of course, the launch is about to take place with about 5 minutes to go, there comes our antagonist for the episode, Inque, as she emerges right from the ground and begins to destroy our rocket.
Feels like a steam bath.
Interior temps just spiked. Shut down the launch sequence. It's not responding. Something's gone wrong with the relays.
4 minutes left. And I'm right on schedule.
So, where does the old man go to unwind?
Tibet. He's visiting some old guru mentor friend. He's got him all over the place.
Perfect. You could take Dane out to that cozy restaurant on the beach.
Can't. Gotta work.
You know, you're skating on thin ice with her already.
You don't get it. He expects me to work even harder while he's gone.
Why?
He always thinks something bad's gonna happen the minute he leaves town. And somehow he's always right.
And wouldn't you know it, just by accident, Batman happens to be on patrol and sees the danger and arrives just in time to attempt to take care of Inque as the countdown continues, and the billionaire watches on from a bit of afar. So it appears that Inque's whole modus operandi here is to destroy, and Batman is there to try and stop her. There's a brief battle, as Batman mentions that the last time he saw Inque, he references the previous episode that we talked about, which you can hear in the archives at DCAUreview.com or on your favorite podcast app. And he mentions that she floated away, but she mentions that she's renewed and ready to fight as she and Batman take on. And he pulls out a freezing batarang and is able to at least temporarily contain her. But we learn that
he opens up, he hits the tank of liquid nitrogen behind her.
Oh, you're right. You know what?
Batarang. Not that really matters.
For some reason in my head, it was a freezy batarang. You're right. I think he hits the nitrogen. You are correct. But yes, this causes her to freeze. But we learn that she has evolved since their last meeting, or at least their last two meetings, and she is no longer impervious to, or she is now impervious to ice. And she's no longer affected by it, so she's able to break out of it. And then she goes about attempting to smother Batman, as is her typical MO. And but Batman himself has learned some tricks himself, and we learn that the Batsuit has been rewired and equipped with this sort of electricity force field. I don't know what you would call it. He's able to switch it on and off, and we see it used later to electrify his fists. So. He's got an electrical current running through his suit at this point. So,
Inque! Last time I saw you, you were washed away in a storm.
And now I'm rainwater fresh, Batman.
Soon to be ice water.
Oh!
What the heck was that?
A new technique, Batman. Did you think I'd learn nothing from our previous encounters? You should have minded your own business.
New circuitry, Inc. Did you think I'd learn nothing from our previous encounters?
I really don't have time for this, Batman.
They meet at what appears to be sort of a standoff as they have sort of both taken some damage, but Inc continues on her mission to destroy the rocket, doesn't have time for any more fisticuffs, and is able to successfully knock over the rocket, launch just as it's about to launch, and it takes off, destroying several different buildings and nearly killing some people in the way, if not for Batman, who swoops in to save the day at the very end. But unfortunately, at that point, the damage is done to the property. Thankfully, no one appears to have been seriously injured, at least that we're told about. But after this, we learn that Bruce has gone to Tibet to visit one of his old gurus, as we learn. Somebody, it's not mentioned who. You got any inkling, pun intended, on who that might be?
Samantha Parbat in Tibet?
Sure, could be.
I think, was there like a mentor guy in the Dead Man episode? I mean, there's the god, there's Ramakrishna, but I'm trying to think if there was like a guy.
I don't know.
There's like a monk guy in
Yeah, I think there is the monk guy.
Yeah, there's the one that Dead Man talks to at the start of that episode. So we'll say it's him.
Okay, all right. Tweet your thoughts as to who Bruce went to visit, perhaps at DCAU Review, or comment on the post on our Instagram page with your own theories. But Bruce is out of town, which means we don't get Bruce at all in this week's episode. So it's just Terry and Max working together. And Terry happens to mention in his two previous meetings with Inc that he did not succeed in defeating her alone, that he needed Bruce's help for both of them. And because of that, he does not want to involve Bruce this time, but kind of wants to take things on his own in order to defeat Inc on his own without any support or help. And especially worried about the last time where Bruce nearly lost his life. Again, you can check out that episode in the archives at DCAUreview.com or on your favorite podcast app. But yeah, we learn at this point that we're going to he's going to work on finding and doing his own detective work. And we get our next, which allows us to see just exactly what's going on as we flash back to our billionaire Winchell, who is on the phone with his insurance company and talking about the loss. And wouldn't you know it, a certain inky visitor, I don't know what I was going with there. A certain flexible villain shows up just in that moment as he hangs up with his insurance company.
We have no choice but to scrap the whole satellite project. Yes, we're all disappointed. It's a great loss for our company.
It's only a loss until your insurance company pays up. Then it'll be more like a profit.
And speaking of profit, I assume you're here for the remainder of your own substantial fee.
Here are the routing numbers for my offshore account.
This shouldn't take long. All I have to do is hit this one key and half my assets become yours. Or I could keep it all for myself. Yes, I prefer the second option. Your resilience is remarkable, but this is no ordinary laser. It's a particle destabilizer. No substance is impervious. Not even you.
That's right. So we quickly find out that this is another example of Inc working arm in arm with a businessman, not Derek Powers this time, but Mr. Winchell. And we find out that she sabotaged the rocket. He actually hired her to sabotage his own rocket for the insurance money. Classic Saturday morning kids cartoon plot line here. But yes, and seemingly it's all going according to plan. Inc is just asking for the rest of her payment. But of course, Mr. Winchell, being such a greedy guy that he would torpedo his own $1 billion rocket launch just to pocket some insurance cash, he decides he doesn't really want to pay her that money, and he pulls out a Deus Ex Machina weapon. Was it the particle destabilizer or something?
I believe that is the name he gave it.
Okay, so it's something that makes Ink not be able to hold. She's always going through something that's made it so she can't hold herself together. So she gets blasted by this laser as we get a little science lesson, and she's just barely able to escape at the 11th hour when things look pretty bad for her. And assuming, however, though she escapes, Winchell is pretty sure that he's done enough damage that she won't be a problem that he'll have to deal with in the future. And from there, we cut to a repo man trying to tow somebody's car. We're introduced here to Deanna Clay, who just seems to be this sort of a little bit down on her luck, 20 or 30 something, a little bank issue here. Her car's about to be repossessed, so she's having the tow away guy try all of these different cards to try to so that she can make a payment at the last second.
I gotta say something about the repo guy.
Sure.
So are we to understand that 50 years from now, whenever now is, the Hitler mustache has finally come back into vogue, like it's uncanceled at this point?
I thought maybe this was like some sort of meta context, like Miss Bader or one of the character designers had a really bad experience with a repo man in their real life, and so they've decided to take it out by
maybe I don't know. It has to be other than like the time that Michael Jordan attempted to bring back the Hitler mustache in the Hanes commercial. I don't think we've had a more just oblivious attempt at trying to bring back such a canceled piece of facial hair. Like I just it's not ever gonna come back. It is unfortunately it cannot be uncanceled. It's not able to happen.
Well, yeah, no, it's that was immediately noticeable. That couldn't wait for visuals because it would just be the first thing that people have to be asking this guy. His friends, his family have to be like, man, why why grow a real mustache? What are you doing, man?
I can pull it off. He's just like so adamant about it. I can pull it off. I can do it. You know what? I'm the guy that can bring it back. And you're like, no, dude, no. Just
absolutely not.
And I see that the most hated human in history.
Oh, but Hitlerian repo men aside, yes, we're introduced to Deanna, who is established very quickly. She's got some money issues, and as she returns back to her apartment, we hear her on the phone with another creditor as she's just reestablishing that she's kind of in over her head when it comes to the bills at the moment.
Oh, poor little repo man. Don't look so sad. I'm sure you'll find other cars. What's this?
You got a problem, lady.
Credit counselor? I don't need a credit counselor. What I need is more credit. Hello? Oh, it's you. Listen, I know I promised to make a payment this week, but something came up. But what if we transfer the balance to the new card? Then use the old card to cover the overdraft. See? I told you we could work it out.
No, wait!
Let me go!
I need your help.
What are you?
I'm your mother.
And at that moment, Ink, we see a very damaged and sort of literally falling apart Ink enter the apartment, and Deanna is terrified and tries to run away. But here's where we get our big twist here, which is that Ink is actually at this apartment because Deanna is her daughter.
Yes, wouldn't you know it that we find out that Ink had Deanna at some point, and she's come to her in an attempt to assist Ink in her what do we call it? Her destabilized DNA at this point. So we learn that Ink reveals that she's her mom, and she's explaining to Deanna specifically a little bit of her backstory. We get some exposition about who Inque was. We learn that she allowed herself to be experimented upon in order to reap the rewards. She got apparently a ton of money, and then realized that she could continue to make money in her current state by sacrificing that, but obviously could not be a mother to her daughter at that point, and it was too dangerous. So she made sure that Deanna was taken care of by giving her a trust fund that Deanna was told was the result of an inheritance, but was in fact Inque funneling money to her in order to continue to take care of her. So we flash back to Hamilton Hill High School, where we have Terry and Dana. Terry, the worst boyfriend in the world, stops himself from trying to blow Dana off, who is asking him just to spare a little bit of time to go someplace with him and Max. But we see that Max interrupts them just as he's about to dismiss, and he actually changes his mind and says that he will go ahead and make time for Dana. But Max shows up with some paperwork showing some backstory and some research on what Terry can figure out as far as Winchell and his particular interest perhaps in having his own rocket destroyed. So as he walks off, he mentions that he's going to have to do some work and some legwork on his own, and says that he'll need Max's help in creating a story of some kind. And Dana happens to overhear apparently just that part, but says that she isn't mad because she's figured out what's really going on, which leaves us with at least a momentary cliffhanger. And we cut back to Deanna's apartment, where Inque is not getting any better. It seems that she's continuing to break down. We see her skin begin to bubble, and she's just kind of in this melting phase. And Deanna asks for more money from her, but Inque is really concerned that she's not going to be able to hold it together for much longer, and tells Deanna that she's going to have to go get some mutagen for her in order to restabilize Inque's DNA. Deanna isn't quite on board, saying that she's not a thief, but Inque very quickly and convincingly apparently is able to tell her that it's easy, and she's going to talk her through how to steal this mutagen from the lab. So Deanna decides she's going to rent a car in order to do it, so that she can't be traced. And it's through this that Inque provides her with some routing information for her bank and PIN numbers, which is going to be important a little bit later. But Deanna, in doing so, actually refers to Inque as mother for the first time, and this is really touching to Inque as she realizes that perhaps they are bonding after all of this time.
Oh, you don't look so good.
It's getting worse. There must be some cellular damage. The only thing that'll help me heal is more mutagen. You'll have to get it for me.
You mean steal it? I'm not a thief.
I'll talk you through it. We'll do it together.
I don't know. I've never done anything like this before.
I need this, Deanna. I need you.
Okay.
The lab is in the Montrose district. You'll have to drive there, though I wouldn't park too close.
Maybe I should rent a car. Mine's kind of conspicuous.
Smart girl. Thinking ahead. I'll transfer some creds into your account. Oh.
It's all right. I'll do it for you, Mother. I just need the transfer codes and a PIN number.
You know, that's the first time you've called me Mother.
And we cut back to the Shimano building where Batman is doing some reconnaissance. He remembered he could turn invisible for a change. I can't believe how much he uses the invisibility this episode. It's like he remembered it. He uses it effectively. Like I couldn't believe it until he just for some reason reveals himself to Winchell. But yeah,
obviously,
yeah, of course, that's what you do.
There's always a limit.
Yeah, right, precisely. And hey, we've said before, if they had linked this back to the Invisible Man suit from See No Evil and Batman the Animated Series, where there's like side effects for using it too much, if you had done that, it would have made it a lot simpler, and it would have made it made a lot more sense. But nope, we have to create that story in our head as to why Terry doesn't just walk around invisible all the time. But anyway, he does do some has some conversations with Winchell. He's discovered Winchell six his security guards on him, but Batman is able to get the best of him, and Winchell wakes up hanging over a ledge. Batman is hanging him over a ledge, demanding to know information. He went old school here with his interrogation tactics. You got to give it to him. He learned something from Bruce, I suppose. But he demands that Winchell gives him information on how he can find ink. Winchell says that he doesn't have that information, but does say that he can provide him with the banking information after Terry figures out that they might be able to get some more information of Ink's whereabouts based on that. He provides that to Max, who is working with him. She plays the role of the eye in the sky for this. She's definitely the oracle of this episode. Even got her own headset and computer that she's working on. So you gotta love that. But in this conversation, as Max is doing the work, we kind of get to figure out just what Dana meant when she said that she knows what's going on. And Max explains after Terry's at least initial apprehension that she may have learned the secret of what he does, is that Dana sees the relationship between Bruce and Terry as much like a father and son, and that after losing his own dad, Terry is very much looking at Bruce as a father figure, which
a father figure, you say?
A father figure, which Max scoffs at hilariously, and then Terry says, "You know what? You may not be too far off." Which
he may not.
This is a forwards and backwards Easter egg, right?
I'm on my way to the mutagenics lab. If Ink's really that badly injured, she's gonna need more mutagen. You tracked down the account yet?
Genius can't be rushed, you know.
So how mad was Dana that I blew off our date?
Actually, she wasn't mad at all. Said she understands the special nature of your job.
What? She found out?
Relax. She was talking about your relationship with Mr. Wayne. She says that with your dad being gone, it was important for you to have a positive father figure. Bruce Wayne. Some father figure.
Maybe she's not so far off.
Hold on. Here it is. Traced it to a European bank. Lots of big electronic deposits. Her fees, I guess. And monthly transfers to an account in Gotham.
Whose?
Checking.
Genius or not, you better hurry. Looks like someone just broke into the lab.
Never fear. I got the transfer info. It's a trust account for someone named Deanna Clay.
Yeah, I mean, apologies to James from Watchtower Database, but we're going to spoil the JLU episode epilogue here. So there's your spoiler warning. Fast forward a minute if you don't want to hear this. If somehow you're listening to this podcast and haven't seen that episode. So it turns out that Bruce is kind of, through a convoluted cloning, DNA rewriting storyline introduced later on in Justice League, we find out that Terry is Bruce's son. However, what we have found out, I think, in the years since, is that had there been a sequel Batman Beyond movie to the Return of the Joker film, that would have focused on Selina Kyle, an older Selina Kyle coming back, and it being revealed that she had, in fact, that Terry was a clone of Batman that was created by, or was a somewhat clone, whatever. You know what happens in the episode of Bruce, created by an elderly Selina Kyle. So we know this was in like the show Bible. It was in the Cliff Notes in the back of their minds long before it made it to the screen in Justice League Unlimited years later. So they definitely were throwing out some hints here, and there's at least one or two later in the series as well, including in the Justice League episodes, or the Batman Beyond Justice League episodes. So there was it was definitely in the air already, and maybe this is a little bit of an allusion to it. But yes, with that hindsight of now having seen epilogue, seen it brought to resolution, that particular line of dialogue is a fun little thing to call back to.
Absolutely. And yeah, you can tune back in now if you had your earmuffs on. We're done talking about spoilers. We're back to this week's episode. And thankfully, using that data that is supplied, the banking data, Max is able to discover that there were recent transfers made into an account in Gotham City and is able to provide the address of one Deanna Clay. We learned her last name is Clay, the irony. Deanna Clay's account. So they're able to get an address for that provided. And Terry has the inkling, again, pun intended, that this may just be where he can discover ink. And wouldn't you know it, that's where we meet up with our hero and villain for their final battle of the episode in our third act.
Yeah, absolutely. So Terry, after getting that name, makes it to the hotel before there's a note that the lab has been broken into, and but then after he gets the address, he makes it back before Deanna can make it back to the apartment, and he and Ink have a brief scuffle, but it's clear that Ink is really too worse for wear to pose any real threat, and seemingly Terry has her dead to rights. But then Deanna walks in, waffles Terry with the suitcase containing this mutagen that's going to heal Ink up, and is able to throw her the syringe, and Ink injects herself with the new mutagen.
Deanna?
Not looking too healthy, Ink.
Healthy enough to take care of you.
It's all ready, Mother. Catch!
No!
Oh! That's more like it. Feels like a tipple now.
Is seemingly back and better than ever, and none of Batman's old tricks, electricity, explosions. He pulls out another favorite Batman Beyond gadget of ours. I think the utility belt buckle buzzsaw thing.
So cool.
Pulls that out. That nothing seems to be working. They end up fighting into there's like a construction site next to Deanna's apartment, where Terry is just getting worn down, and right when it seems like Ink has him dead to rights, buries him under a bunch of rubble. He's barely able to escape from that, and then as she is ready to deliver perhaps the killing blow, it seems that there was a little something extra in that mutagen that Deanna had given her mother, as she begins to sort of dissolve and fall apart once again. And we reveal that Deanna added an extra ingredient, that being a solvent. And as Ink sort of cries out and asks why, Deanna explains that she doesn't need her mother because her mother already gave her access to all of her bank accounts. And so there's nothing that she needs from her mother anymore. And when Ink asks why she would betray her, she explains that all she ever got from Ink was in fact money, and so that's all she cared about getting was Ink's money.
What did you do? What was in that mutagen?
Pentarol. It's a solvent. You're dissolving, Mother.
Why? Why would you do this to me?
For the money. I have your accounts. And you're right. It is more money than I could ever imagine.
After all I gave you, how could you have turned out like this?
You never gave me anything except money, Mother. How did you expect me to turn out?
So seemingly ink dissolves away, and it's a very cold ending. We get a little bit of an epilogue as Batman returns to a new area, a new palatial estate that Deanna has apparently purchased with her mother's ill-gotten gains. And Batman lets her know that some of the residue that Ink left behind at the scene on that fateful day has disappeared from police evidence. And when she mentions that she's not particularly scared because Ink is dead, Batman reminds her that Ink's been dead before. And then we get that sort of the realization setting in that the horror movie monster may not yet be dead to end our episode.
Yeah, we get some creepy shadows. It's funny. It's I think the DCAU wiki pointed it out, but it's very much like the end of If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich, where Mockridge is sitting in his bed, quite afraid, wondering if the Riddler is going to come back to continue to exact revenge against him, as Deanna suddenly realizes that there's a lot of dark shadows around her that are moving at this estate that she used to purchase, that she used stolen funds from her mother to purchase. And then we get that one of the shadows does indeed move, and we see it turn into this extremely menacing looking eyeball. So it appears that Ink was indeed around, at least looking to exact some sort of revenge. But we fade to black at that point. So yeah, Liam, I guess we can get into our plot for this week's episode. I think as far as if we call this the Inque Trilogy, yes, as you mentioned at the top, Ink does come back, but it is in a extremely minor role for her next appearance. So if we're looking at the trio of Ink episodes, I think there's some intrigue, at least in this, because you attempt to humanize her a little bit. And I think adding a second antagonist that double crosses her can maybe lead to some conflicting feelings. It's like, oh, she's betrayed by her own flesh and blood, no honor among thieves type thing. Is like, should I feel compassion for her? Should I feel bad for her? But then again, it's like mother, like daughter. She's, they both only do what they do for money. And it was clear that Deanna was only sort of acting in the same way and exacting revenge for not having a parent and being taught that money is the only thing that matters. So I think this is probably the weakest of the three plot wise. I do like the other two episodes better plot wise. But I think that it's a fine way to sort of wrap up this character's story arc in the whole series, if you're looking at it that way. I feel like it's paced pretty well. It is a little bit formulaic, I think, having I mean, we joked about it at the beginning, like a children's cartoon where the guy is out to get insurance money, but is not exactly like a thing that's easy for your 8-year-old to necessarily comprehend. But it is something that was played heavily upon. How many different characters have we seen do that in some form or fashion? I think.
I was thinking about that, because it's like we can't. It felt like, well, we can't use Derek Powers because he disappeared, never to be seen again, except in some comics. Paxton got arrested at the end of that last Royal Flush Gang episode, so we'll introduce a third crusty Gotham billionaire who needs a supervillain to do corporate espionage for him. It does feel like pretty well trodden ground for this series by this point.
It's also, I think, even if you look at the first episode of Superman the Animated Series, it wasn't insurance money, right? That Lex had he was looking to do dealings with whatever it is. But there's that idea of like the scummy businessman that is trying to figure out ways to scam other people, which again, I'm not saying that that's not realistic. I'm not saying that there isn't some sort of real world aspect that you can apply to that. But it does feel like now that we're almost 4 series into this at this point, if you count the New Batman Adventures as its own separate series. How many times can you go back to that same theme as the motivation for the villain? Maybe that part of the story wasn't needed as much. Like maybe you could have just had her doing anything, because it does at least create some of the it's how she gets affected by this gun or whatever, but maybe you just have her come back and she's already experiencing this because of what happened in the previous episode. I don't know, but that was really my only critique about it. Is it's the weakest, I think, of the 3 episodes plot wise, but I still think that there is some good stuff there. I do like the idea of the double cross that you don't necessarily see coming, unless you're, super smart and obvious and you realize that when she's asking for PIN numbers and account numbers, that might be she might have an ulterior motive for Deanna to be asking for those things. But I ended up giving it a pretty solid 7 out of 10 because I did enjoy it. I think that it has a pretty solid bit of action, as we'll talk about in visuals and animation in a bit. I think the fights between these characters, between Batman and Inque, are so well done and choreographed, and just the visuals that we'll talk about here shortly are just accompany it or make it so enjoyable. But you get to have a lot more unique situations and circumstances for these characters to interact with each other. So yeah, I liked it a good bit. How about you?
Yeah, I do like it. I think, I don't know, like based on how she got washed away in the rain the last time I saw her.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we could have cut the whole corporate espionage bit, because really that's just to set up her getting hit with the magic laser that hurts her.
Right.
So if we could have started the episode with Inque, just showing up in this strange woman's apartment, you find out it's her daughter, I feel like it would have been better, because it could have given you a little bit more time to flesh out that relationship. So when the twist occurs, it feels maybe more dramatic. But as it stands, like you said, I don't disagree. I think it's a good, solid episode. I like learning more about this character who's always been such a visual treat, as we've talked about in her previous episodes, but not really we haven't really she's been this sort of gun for hire, or I guess she was out for revenge in the last episode, but we haven't really gotten to actually getting to learn a little bit more about who she was before she was Inque and everything. I think is that's an interesting idea. And yeah, the criminal who has the soft spot for their kid that they had to leave behind, and trading being a mother for financially supporting the kid from afar and all that. Like there's some really interesting stuff at play here that I wish just got like a little bit more room to breathe. So yeah, for all those reasons, I think if I didn't say, I gave it the exact same score, 7 out of 10. I think it's good, but maybe with a few tweaks here, if we found another way, maybe Inque just gets like damaged in I guess there had to be a reason for her to be at the rocket at the beginning. But if we could have maybe combined that and just had her injured like right at the start of the episode, so we could have gotten more time with her and Deanna leading up to it, I think that would have put it into the very good to great category. But as it stands, still a pretty good time.
Yeah, I mean, you could even start the episode with her showing up in this girl's apartment, or do the bit with the repo man and all that stuff, and have that girl go back to her apartment and Inque show up, and then Inque explains who she is. You kind of have the first act cliffhanger there of, oh my goodness, Inque's got a daughter. And then we kind of you could have just had Inque tell her what happened, and it be, I was working on this case, or I was working on this job to make money, and the person double crossed me, and you see what happens. Like, I understand that, I guess that they wanted to have sort of the mid-break action point where Terry goes to Winchell's office in order to get the information from him, and have this little fisticuffs with the armored security guards. But I think we're nitpicking or critiquing here, but I think that the reason why is because, again, we have seen that sort of corporate double cross happen as a recurring theme throughout the entire DCAU, not just Batman Beyond, but especially Batman Beyond at this point. So something of a different flavor, could have elevated it, but nonetheless, still solid scores from both of us. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which of course is going to be animation and visuals. As you mentioned at the top, Coco and Dong Yang responsible for this week's episode, written by written by Hilary J. Bader, who, by the way, just some kudos. We kind of I think we've had a lot of Hilary J. Bader this month. I think almost everything exclusively has been either co-written or teleplay by her. So kudos. This is one of those episodes where, hey, it's a solid episode. It's a good solid episode. Mm-hmm. We nitpicked on a couple things, but the rest of the episode is pretty strong. But directed by Butch Lukic and Coco Dong Yang, as we mentioned, responsible for the animation. What stood out for you? What did you like? There's a lot to enjoy when you have ink involved in an episode.
Well, yeah, that's the thing right off the back. I think that opening sequence on the rockets about to take off, that's like I think a really unique setting for this show, where you're not necessarily always on rooftops for your fight scenes, like maybe in the original animated series, but there's just I think that's a really fun environment in general. And then I feel like every time ink, you don't necessarily see like the same transitions. It's not just like she makes a hammer or she makes a knife. Like sometimes she has like extra arms and just the constant sort of literally and figuratively the fluidity of how she moves and the different ways that she moves depending on the parts of the episode, from the start when she's healthy and sort of in attack mode to once she's been damaged and she has this sort of, she's much more liquefied at that point. She's kind of constantly, there's stuff dripping off of her kind of the entire time. Even when she kind of goes back to that more human face, she still has like this real murky look to her. And then when she gets the mutagen in, there's sort of a wave. It's like you're dropped a stone in a pond or something that kind of goes through her as she takes more solid form. So as always, I think it's going to be a standout. The various ways you get into the different shape shifting and shapes, but the actual, I guess, the consistency of ink, meaning her physical consistency in this episode, changing so much from scene to scene depending on kind of what how the type of health she was in, I guess, throughout the episode, for lack of a better term, I thought was really phenomenal. I think that closing sequence on the when they're fighting in the construction area is really, really strong. And again, Terry's just kind of completely outmatched and trying all these different fun gadgets. And him, again, we already talked about it in the plot, but him using the buzz saw to slice through her, just fantastic. And the way that she's like always trying to like crush or smother him when they fight, I think is really fun. Like that's her go-to move. Yeah, just like either she ties him up or she just engulfs him. And it's like there's like I always think like the ink fights always feel like real brutal and like viscerally terrifying to just be like just be fighting a giant mud woman who can just suffocate you. Like it just feels very like, even with all the future bat tech, he just feels so outmatched in this fight when she's at 100% anyway.
No, I agree completely. I think we could probably talk for 20 to 30 minutes just on the ink the ink visuals for this week. I mean, how fun do they have with being, or how much fun did they have with, she doesn't follow normal standards as far as how a character moves. She can go into 5 or 6 different directions. She bounces in one direction and then kind of bounces in the other direction. She defies the law of gravity in a lot of ways. She shapeshifts. She, creates all these different forms of her body, but it's not just like, as you mentioned, like it's very abstract. It's not going to be a specific as Clayface does or Plastic Man would have, where you're creating an object. It's more of a she functions like a liquid more than she does an actual rubber person or a clay. So, the name Ink fits her. It makes sense at that point. So I think we've probably talked about that in the prior 2 episodes with her also, which were Disappearing Ink and Blackout, by the way. I think we didn't mention that. But check those reviews out where we talked about that. I think the way that they visualized, you mentioned it, the way that they visualized her illness in this, where as soon as this gun hits her, this destabilizer, and she begins to have this melting effect that kind of plagues her throughout the rest of the episode until Deanna brings her this mutagen and she kind of is able to power up and reform. But it doesn't just stop with the dripping melting effect that she has. She has these like boils that are bubbling and popping off of her while she's just kind of sitting there. It's grotesque. Like it's really, really unsettling, the things that they were able to do. And they did such a great job in that first episode in Blackout where she, it was very much a horror themed episode. It's very, very dark. There are certain things that happen where she tries to, choke Terry by jamming herself down his throat, essentially, smother him that way. There's some real horror elements to this character, the way it moves, the way she talks. So the fact that they leaned back into that here with more grotesque things, and there's certainly different moments, especially in the fight scene at the end where she's kind of fully powered up. There's a shot where they're on this construction site and she just sort of creates, she kind of enlarges herself, and then she has all of these different limbs. She looks like a spider or some sort of arachnid, and she's trying to crash down on Terry. And as you mentioned in the very first scene, she does her best to try and smother him. So you get this really horrific looking, it looks like she's got a plastic bag over his head essentially and is trying to smother him, but you see his imprint coming through her form there. So many fun different things that they were able to do. And she doesn't get as much. She has the opening fight with Terry, and then she's kind of relegated to the couch for that middle portion. And then we have the final battle in the third act. But I think for not having as much time as she had in some of the other episodes to kind of move around and fight Terry, only had 2 fights versus, the normal 3 or whatever she's had in past episodes. I really feel like they maximized the time to kind of get some of those visuals out there. And boy, it was just super fun. Like it's a fun character. They had a lot of fun animating it, and the animators did a really, really good job for this as far as her visuals are concerned. I'll mention Deanna Clay. I didn't see this anywhere, but Deanna Clay's visual or her character model reminded me of Christina Ricci, the actress.
100%.
For everything from just the way that she's petite, small, but also has sort of a unique hairline. She's got this haircut. So not sure if it was modeled directly after her. We know, however, that creators oftentimes would model people after different actors and actresses, and quite possibly this is a popular time for Miss Ricci to be an actress. So I would say that more than likely that might have been some sort of influence for the character. But other than that, I think Batman does look very cool. The moment that he's introduced in this episode, he's just sort of standing on the Batmobile as he's talking to Ink, and that shot, it's just kind of this front facing shot, and it's you get the sky behind him, and he's sitting there on the floating Batmobile as he's talking to her. The fight scene with both the villains the army of faceless soldiers that happen to also look like the same soldiers that served Derek Powers in the Wayne Powers. The Wayne Powers. So more credence.
This is like a local mercenary,
or security, just like a security firm. Yeah,
private security firm.
Yeah. But then in the little battle that he has against Winchell, who's trying to use the destabilizer on the particle destabilizer. He's sort of like running around on the walls. They do some pretty good stuff with that. There's some shaky cam that they use to really drive home the fact of the rocket launch at the beginning of the episode that I liked. And then the battles between Inque and Batman. You already mentioned him pulling out the buzzsaw buckle to slice through her. There's a lot of it in the same way that they took liberties with doing things with robots and mannequins and such to destroy things throughout this series. It seems like they also had a little more leeway with this character because she was made of liquid, because there's splatter hitting the wall. There's shots of her, just holes, stuff going through her, and her exploding into a bunch of different pieces. Her actual melting scene is downright horrific as she just melts down and her human form comes back up, but it begins to melt also. And then you just see like her teeth floating in the puddle, like very horrific. But so strong stuff there. My only critique, and it's funny, I didn't notice this until I looked through the DCAU wiki and they pointed it out. And once I saw it, I was like, yeah, I can't give this a perfect score because of this. But the line in the episode as Batman shows up at the end to talk to Deanna, she's sitting there sunbathing, and she says, you're standing in my sun. And he sort of gives her this, dissertation about keeping an eye on things and the police will be after her, and reveals that Inque is not dead. And as he flies away, he flies in front of the moon. So
maybe she has like an artificial like sun lamp off screen that we couldn't see.
No, I'm not believing. All right. As much as I wanted to, I can't. So because of that one goof, again, I always go back to Heart of Ice. I didn't give Heart of Ice a perfect score for visuals because of the one inverted bat signal. If I did that there, I have to do this here. I can't give this a perfect score for it if it has a goof. So I ended up giving it a very strong 9 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went with an 8 out of 10. I think all the fight scenes I think are really strong. And that is a pretty big gaff, I guess. I guess you would definitely place that on the background and on the final edit there. Maybe it was just by the time it was noticed, it was too late type of thing. But yeah, like I said, I think it's really strong. The opening fight scene and the ending fight scene are a lot of fun, and just the varying of the back gadgets and some of the more complicated. There's sort of there's a shot of the rocket. It like falls on its side and then like starts blasting through these warehouses before it ends up hitting the fuel tank or whatever. I think is really fun. Like Batman's sort of running across it and Inque is sort of following him. They all kind of do it as one continuous shot. I thought that was pretty well done. And as Batman kind of saves the worker from the explosion at the start of the episode, the smoke and the fire is sort of almost looks like it's just in frame. It almost looks like it's fingers, like it's kind of reaching out to try to grab hold of Batman, and as he's flying away. So I thought there were some really cool visual tricks in this episode that I really enjoyed. But yeah,
did you see the one when Batman's doing his reconnaissance? He remembers that he can turn invisible. He lands on the roof. I really, really liked this. He lands on the roof and he's in focus and the background is blurred. And then they do a quick switch where suddenly he's out of focus and the background is in focus. I was like, man, that's a neat little trick to make this feel like a real world, like this is
Absolutely.
really a movie or a film. Like that's just a cool trick.
Absolutely.
The last thing I'll mention that I don't think either of us mentioned was in that final fight scene right before the dissolvent or the solvent kicks in, as it appears that Inque is going to win, she pulls out the old Bane break Batman's back trick. As she does it a little bit more brutally, though, with not just trying to break him over her knee, but she makes her knee into a giant spike that is coming up sort of through Batman's back at that point and trying to break him over the knee. So, we'd be remiss not to mention that another villain tried to paralyze slash kill Batman in the same way as a classic Batman villain did.
That's right. It's like poetry. It rhymes. But and yeah, I yeah. If we haven't praised it enough, that the final shot where they're looking around at all the shadows, and then the shadow forms into Ink's eye, and I guess we didn't really talk about this in plot. Is that a metaphorical? She's still out there, or does she literally show up to kill her daughter? And that's in that moment.
I think it's left up to your own interpretation. I would interpret it as was literally there.
Okay.
It was a quick and swift end for Deanna, because it doesn't seem like, to me, if Ink was able to reform, that she would waste much time in exacting revenge and getting her money back from her spoiled brat daughter.
I think that's fair. I was just thinking about that, if it's sort of again, if it's just sort of where we're looking out into the ether and we sort of see the eyes in the sky sort of thing, or if it's literally supposed to be that she's there in that moment. So that's a fun bit. That's another thing. If you want to tweet us at or comment on Instagram at DCAU review and tell us what you think. But yeah, that ending bit where the shadow swirls around and then the purples and blues sort of slowly enter the frame and then form the eye is a really neat way to end the episode either way.
All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which of course is going to be music. I believe you mentioned at the top, Michael McQuistion responsible for this week's music. And I had a couple different notes here. I did a lot of talking in our last category, though, so I will allow you to go first to see what kind of notes you had as far as music was concerned.
Yeah, I didn't have much. I feel like it's pretty standard, beyond fair.
Mm-hmm.
You have your synthesizers and electric guitar. I like the opening action sequence music there. I think it has a really fast and exciting pace to it. I think it adds to that opening bit there with Terry trying both to fight Ink and then also having to deal with this the explosion and the destruction of this ticking clock on the countdown to the rocket. I think is really fun. And then there's definitely some use of like those lighter synths, kind of those really echoey synths. I think in the Deanna apartment scenes with her and her mother, which I kind of appreciated. But beyond that, I'll be honest, I didn't have a lot of other notes for music other than our usual notes about the action there. But I did notice that I felt like they were doing something. There's not really an Ink theme, so it's hard to really zero in on anything without being able to listen to the soundtrack in its entirety. But I thought those were kind of the stands out. Was I think they were trying to play sort of a softer, more emotional synth during some of the sequences there with Ink and Deanna.
Yeah, it's definitely downplayed in those scenes as a more vulnerable Ink is speaking with in a more quiet setting. The notes that I had, I think the scene with Batman doing his investigation with Winchell, and one of the things that I noticed, which I think is probably uniform across the series, but I think in some ways is sort of the Michael McQuistion trademark for the series, is that you have sort of these intense moments where in that scene you have the guitar come in, you have the drums come in. Once the security force shows up and we see that there's going to be this little fight, of course you get the guitar wailing, but then you have these little moments where the guitar will drop out and it's just synth, and it's sort of just a very spooky, it sounds sort of like a choir or voice effect essentially through a synth of just giving single notes, and then you kind of get the drums come in at different spots. It's just kind of maybe a light hi-hat and a couple of tom-toms coming in, and then you hear just the synth, and then the drum will have a little drum roll again, and then the music will kick back in again, and you get the guitar and the drums and everything all together. And in that scene you do get that, and it was just something that I was like, man, this is sort of the trademark of this, is that you set those downbeats, those moments where maybe Terry is escaped, or the his adversary is looking for him in the midst of the smoke, as it is in this case, as Winchell has created this smoke screen, much to his own chagrin, and he's unable to find Batman. And then as Batman pops out of the smoke, the guitar wails again. But I think in the main music the main musical pieces that I noted were the fight in the action at the end. You kind of have almost an inverted Beyond theme. It sounds like the Beyond theme, but it's almost like the parts are rearranged in different orders. So it kind of plays backwards almost, or upside down, or whatever. It sounds like Batman's in peril, but you have the same notes that you're used to hearing from those themes. And then the creepy ending, as Batman has flown away and Deanna is there by herself, and she begins looking around, and you just kind of get this light synth playing, and then this really creepy horror theme that plays over top of it once they do the reveal of the eye. Just effective storytelling. It sets the mood for that and creates this intense moment of, oh my goodness, the villain is still here. Those were the notes that I had as far as music were concerned. Otherwise, the rest of the episode solid, I think. I ended up giving music a 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point lower. I went 6 out of 10. I do agree. I did have that in my notes. That final little sting as we get the reveal of Ink, and we sort of build that tension where she's just kind of looking around at the shadows and the water and everything, kind of, and then we get the big reveal at the very end. There is really well done. It's not really dramatic. It's not like these shrieking horns or strings or anything, but it plays into that moment pretty perfectly there.
All right, Liam, let's wrap things up here with this week's voice cast. Not a lot of actors and actresses this week, but enough, and a couple of guest stars to chat about here. So let's get to it and talk about this week's voice actors.
Absolutely. So our first guest star, we have Peter Mark Richmond as Winchell, who folks would know from, probably, if you're an older folk, you might remember him from Dynasty, or from some of the Friday the 13th movies as well. Some other voice acting to his credit. He's there to play a crusty billionaire. He doesn't have a lot to do, but I think he does a solid job. And I will just mention, if you look up a picture of this gentleman, Peter Mark Richmond, his character design seemed to be slightly based on his real life looks. So I thought that was kind of a nice touch.
Interesting. Well. But he also played Abin Sur apparently in Superman the Animated Series, and plays Charles Baxter in Batman the Animated Series. So multiple DCAU videos or voice acting roles from Charles Baxter from the Riddler's Reform episode of the Baxter's Toy Company.
There you go. So that's a pretty memorable one at the very least. So yeah, I think he does a solid job. But elsewhere in our minor cast, we have a couple of our regulars. Very briefly, we have Lauren Tom as Dana, who has gaslit herself into letting Terry off the hook this week, the poor girl. and of course we have Cree Summer as Max. I like that. There is the thing where obviously so much of the show is about Terry and Bruce, but when you do take Bruce, I'm never gonna celebrate because Kevin Conroy isn't in an episode that we review, but it does give Terry a different personality to bounce things off of. Like we talked about that a couple of weeks ago when we reviewed Untouchable, where Bruce is very much just immediately cutting through all the BS and calling Terry out, and doesn't want to hear about any of these these teenage problems that he has going on while they're on a case. Whereas Max gets to kind of play a different side of that a slightly more sympathetic ear for Terry to bounce things off of, and also to even though it's a very brief conversation, to touch on the dichotomy of Terry looking for a father figure on one end, and then you have Deanna and Ink's parental relationship literally and figuratively dissolving before our eyes in this episode. So I think Miss Summer, of course, does a very solid job in what's asked of her.
You know what I like about her also is
Mhm.
that, at least, especially in this episode, but in the role that she's given, which I probably would have liked to have seen her in a different role. I don't know that putting on a costume was something that was ever an option or that I necessarily would have wanted to see, but maybe not so much as just straight supporting cast for Max. We do get a couple episodes, obviously, that are Max focused, but nonetheless, she gets to be the comedy, and then Terry has to play off of her as more of the straight man, and as opposed to Terry being the comedic quip machine and Bruce being the straight man. So you do change the dynamics a little bit around there, and you get Will Friedle having to getting to be a little bit more serious, and Cree Summer providing a little bit more of the comedy as Max.
Absolutely. And from there, we have our other couple of guest stars. We have playing the role of Deanna Clay. We have Miss Azura Sky, who would probably be best be known for, she had a couple episodes of Buffy that she was on around this time, which I'm guessing is why, not that she's not a talented actress, I'm sure, but as we've talked about, Buffy was just such a kind of sudden mega hit for the WB network at the time that it influenced a lot of other programs, including Batman Beyond, as Bruce Timm and others have sort of talked about, and how so I'm sure that's not an accident that one of the Buffy actresses ended up in this role. But more recently, she's also been on a lot of episodes of Riverdale and things like that. But it's interesting because she kind of has this like ditzy air about her, I feel like, when you first meet her, but then she and there's not like a great change in her inflection, but I do feel when that more villainous turn comes, it works because it feels more like she's a sociopath. Like she has no qualms or emotions about stepping on anybody. Like she just she like, and she kind of sets that up at the beginning a little bit, in the sense when she's telling him, like, I don't need help managing my finances. I just need more money, or whatever she says. Like she's very single-minded. Somehow, like I said, even though it's not a complete change in her performance, it feels very like it works for me. Like the way it just feels so cold when she's just explaining that, like, all you ever gave me was money, and that's all I wanted from you,
right
at the end there. And her playing off of, since they're so linked in this episode, we can kind of talk about them both at once. Shannon Kenny, of course, returning as Inque in this episode, who I really like. I always really like her as Inque, but again, giving her more to do, and you don't really cast her in a sympathetic light. But I think that comes back to something that I think sometimes gets misconstrued in modern film or television criticism, which is that you can make a character who is still a bad person doing bad things, but you can still make them a bit more relatable. You can flesh them out. You can have them act like a regular human being.
Sure. Yeah.
I think sometimes people feel like, oh, well, if they have a mildly sympathetic backstory, that means we're supposed to like them or defend their actions, or the show is endorsing their actions. And I never get that sense with Inque. But when you learn more about her and you go, she was on the run and she had a baby and she was young, and she put her off on her adopted parents or a foster system or whatever, but she tried to keep in touch from afar and send her money and all this stuff. Like I just liked seeing the way they bounced off of each other, and how this complete lack of a relationship and how they're both kind of using each other in this moment is, I think both Miss Kenny as Inque and Miss Sky as Deanna, like they really play well off of each other. And that's, neither one of them is a full-time actor on the show. They have to do a lot of the both the expositional lifting of the episode, and also a lot of like the emotional heavy lifting of the episode.
Yeah. I will be honest. I think their work together brings up Miss Sky's performance, and I don't know. It doesn't look like prior to this episode that she had much, if any, voice acting experience. And I would say that may show a little bit. I see that in her history, she did American Dad after this and some stuff for video games. So, perhaps her experience here helped launch additional voice acting opportunities for her, which is great. But I think, at least initially, it comes off as a little bit wooden. I think her conversations, later on as she's interacting, specifically with Inque and Miss Kenny's performance, I think that's where you start to see a little bit more emotion, and you start to see a little bit more depth. So I think off the bat, and even in the final scene with Terry, it felt, again, sort of kind of one note, very monotone in a lot of ways, as she interacts with Batman, rather, not Terry. So I think the strength comes certainly with the chemistry with Miss Kenny's Inque, and does sort of reveal a little bit of that warmth and brings a little bit more emotion out of her. So I think in those scenes is where she actually gets to kind of show a little bit of her talent. So overall, I think better together than separate, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's definitely where the episode shines for both of them. And and almost like I said, I think the 3 Inque episodes we got they're all somewhere between good to great, I think. So it's hard to necessarily want to mess with that, and you always run the risk of I think diluting a character the more you use them. Pun very much intended. But the fact that this is kind of the last, as we said, the last full appearance that Miss Kenny gets as Inque, as we're now just learning more and more about her, her past life, I think that's interesting. And it would have been nice to maybe get her in the booth for 1 or 2 more episodes. But as it stands, like I said, I think she and Miss Sky, and of course Will Friedle as Batman, as we said. No Kevin Conroy as Bruce Wayne this week, but we do have Will as Batman. He doesn't have a lot to do in this episode. Like we said, there's a little bit of there's a little bit of different dynamic with him and Cree Summer in this episode, which is fun. But I think overall it's a pretty solid to good outing from everybody out there. And so I ended up on a pretty strong 8 out of 10 for my voice acting this week.
Hey, that's exactly the same score that I gave it. 8 out of 10 as well. Yeah, pretty solid all the way around from our voice cast. Maybe we talked about it already. There is some redeeming factor to not having a Kevin Conroy appearance, but that is something that always adds at least a point or 2 to the score. So who's to say if Kevin Conroy was in this cast if we wouldn't have been close to perfect at that point. But 8, still a solid score from both of us. All right, Liam, let's wrap things up at this point with our final scores, tallying everything up at this point. I end up with a pretty solid 31 out of 40 for my score. I know I had a higher rank in a couple of different categories, so I imagine yours might be at least a point or 2 below mine.
Yeah, just tallying everything up, I could just come in at a couple points lower of a 29 out of 40. We can briefly touch on rewatchability. Yeah, I mean it's as you said, it's the third episode of the trilogy. It's a returning villain, and it's just a pretty good, solid episode all the way around. So I would give this a thumbs up for rewatchability.
Yeah, agreed. I have no disagreement with that. It's important to the Rogues Gallery of Batman. Inque does return, as you mentioned, in a later episode. So if you missed this one, it would be kind of weird that she just shows up later on to fight Batman and interact with the Man of Tomorrow. So, but that is a bridge that we will cross when we come to it in the future. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, we would love your support for the podcast, and there are multiple different ways for you to do that. The first couple of ways, of course, are to check out the show notes. There is a link to directly support us financially if you'd wish to do it that way. Buy myself or Liam a cup of coffee. Or you can also check out the link in the show notes to our store, where you can pick up a piece of merchandise through our store shop. You can also support us by leaving a review and 5-star review for our podcast if you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or if your ancillary podcast platform allows you to leave a review, heck, leave one on there as well. Leave a little blurb if it allows you to do so. Don't forget, if you listen to us on Spotify, we have our Spotify exclusive poll and our question of the week, which we always post there. You can check that out. Is also in the show notes if you're listening on Spotify. So check that out. Let your voice be heard. Give us some feedback and vote in this week's poll. And then, of course, if you want to support us an additional way, you can follow us on social media at DCAU Review, both on Twitter and Instagram. And of course, as we mentioned at the top of the program, head over to youtube.com/thepodtower and subscribe there, like the videos as they come out, and check out those other podcasts, both Jump on the Bat-Wagon and Tim Talk, that stream on there with us. They cover some great DCAU stuff as well. Liam, next week is the 4th Saturday of the month, and we are going to deviate from the DCAU. We're going to take a trip around the multiverse, but we're sticking with the theme of a trip into the future. What's happening here? Where are we headed?
That's right. We decided to spare ourselves and our listeners another 2 episodes of the Zeta Project for now. And instead, we are going to look into the Elseworlds, as you said, Cal, and back to maybe I'll just say it, our show's favorite Elseworld that we visit quite frequently. That being Batman, the Brave and the Bold. And it's the episode Knights of Tomorrow, which features not only an older Dick Grayson taking up the mantle of Batman, but a new Robin introduced as well. And what I believe at the time was the first animated appearance of one Damian Wayne. So lots to get into next week as we look at an alternate take on a future Batman and Robin. So looking forward to that next week.
Also featuring Dietrich Bader, who everyone knows as the voice of Zeta.
There you go. Still on theme. It's in the future and Dietrich Bader is in it. So it's pretty much the same as the Zeta Project episode, except better because it's not.
I couldn't have put it better myself. I can't wait to review that with you. But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.